You're listening to the Today's Eden podcast, episode 40. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey everybody, I hope you are having an awesome Wednesday. Today I'm super excited to share this episode with you because this is actually our second recording for this episode. I had some technical difficulties and our first go at it did not save. And then unfortunately, Michelle was affected by the Florida hurricanes. And so, that's who is on the podcast today, Michelle Lisa Anderson, and she is the host of the Wife of an Alcoholic podcast, a podcast for women who love someone that drinks too much or suffers from addiction. So I know that most of you probably listen to podcasts in the car or with earbuds on and your kids aren't around. So I just want to make sure that I disclaimer that if your kiddos are in the car with you, this probably isn't a good episode to have on. We don't go into graphic details, but you guys know me by now, and I don't like to stray away from the difficult, hard stuff. And so we are definitely going to dive into abuse of all sorts in relationships, talking about addiction with relationships and marriage. And so I really think that this is an amazing podcast to listen to, whether you have or you haven't been in this type of relationship, because I'm sure that you either will come across someone who has, or if you were in one in the past, this is also very helpful to kind of think through. And a big realization, I feel like, is you're going to get clarity on the reasons why and why you felt that way, why you reacted that way, and maybe even why you picked these types of relationships in the first place. And so I am amazed by Michelle for her bravery in sharing her story and for changing all these women's lives, because she is offering not only her podcast, but groups to help women talk about and work through these situations, and courses to do the same, and just amazing resources to reach out and not feel alone. And, being a mom can be hard. And when you have a marriage that is just suffering from this sort of, in the trenches kind of thing, and you're going through it, it can be really hard. So I really was excited to bring Michelle on to talk about this. So without further ado, let's get to the topic. I'm going to let her share all the good stuff. Let's get to it. Hey, Michelle, I am so grateful to have you on the podcast because I really believe that you are changing the lives of women all over the world, and your podcast is doing so amazing. I love to see it just climb on the iTunes chart. But before we talk about your podcast and what that's about, I want to start with you and who you are and your story and a little bit of background for those who haven't heard of you or listened to your podcast before.
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on here, because there are not many women or people in the community that are willing to talk about the subject that I love to talk about. It definitely takes courage to not only give addiction a voice, but also to make space for other people to talk about it. So I'm really, really, really grateful that you're willing to do that. And I hinted a little bit, but my name is Michelle Lisa Anderson, and I run an online community for around 20,000 women at MichelleLisaAnderson.com. And it's for women who are in love with someone who drinks too much or suffers from addiction. So it could be any kind of addiction to drugs or alcohol or pornography, gambling, sex, any kind. And I've been doing that for about 6 years. I have a blog and several online programs, and as well as the Wife of an Alcoholic podcast. And I'm actually getting ready to launch another podcast in November that are stories of the women that have that are a part of my community. And I'm really excited about that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would be amazing. And for those that don't know, you were also in kind of a relationship that was filled with addiction, and you're no longer in that relationship anymore. But so it's really awesome to see that you can kind of take the stuff that you learned and help other women navigate through the things that they're going through now.
Yeah. I was. So I met my ex-husband in high school, and he was a really typical, good-looking jock, smart, had it all, which
Yeah.
is very common among alcoholics and addicts. I mean, this disease happens to amazing people,
Yeah.
and he was the guy that just could do anything. And we fell in love after high school, after college. Actually, met together, met back up. And I'm so sorry. And let me interrupt really quickly. If you hear the snoring, that is my dog, Albert. He is 100 massive, and I apologize. Maybe you can cut that out, but
Yeah, that's totally fine.
he's by my feet at every moment, and every
Aw.
podcast episode of mine, you can hear him snoring in the background, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I apologize. But anyways, so I was married. I fell in love with this wonderful guy,
Yeah.
and we had 3 children together.
Mhm.
And the whole time, I just kept feeling so alone and so helpless, because here was this amazing man who had so much potential. And it started with, 3 beers on weekends, to drinking, 6 to 8 to a 12 pack. And then we slowly got into drugs. And then he stopped coming home at night. And I just was watching our relationship just completely unravel, and this disease take over this great guy. And I remember being so desperate to know what to do specifically to help.
Yeah.
But everything that I was trying to do to help ended up not making a difference at all. So I would yell or beg or plead when he would come home after, a night of heavy drinking or partying. I remember he would pass out on the bed, and I would wake up early in the morning and sit at the end of the bed ready to, for him to wake up so that I could remind him of everything that he did last night, and remind him of all of, his poor choices, to make him feel guilty enough.
Yeah.
Because I kept thinking, if he just understood what was doing to me and to his kids, clearly he would change. I mean, this can't be the way that it would, he can't continue like this forever.
Yeah.
But nothing I did, the begging, the pleading, the bribing, the negotiating. I mean, I tried negotiating with him, where I would say, okay, you can drink hard alcohol on weekends only, or anytime we went on vacation, then you can drink. So then all of a sudden we'd end up going on like vacation after vacation after and then we'd be, I remember one vacation we were at Disney World, and we went to you can't drink at Magic Kingdom.
Right.
But I think you can drink at Epcot. Yeah, you can. And so we just spent all the days at Epcot, and it was just like, there was no winning. There was no way that anything that I could do would make a difference in his choices and his addiction. And so I was kind of at the end of my rope after being, it was 10 years. And I loved to research. And so I went to the bookstore one night late, and I was wearing, yucky sweatpants, because you don't really care for yourself when you love somebody with addiction. You put all of your energy and time and thought into helping them, not helping yourself. So I went to the bookstore in these crummy old pants, and I just was haggard, and I gained so much weight, and I was combing the bookshelves looking for stories of women like me, women who loved somebody who was in pain, and I needed an answer. I needed to know what specifically to do. And I couldn't find any. I found all of these amazing books written by wonderful men and women who have recovered from this disease, but there was nothing written for the actual ones who loved them. And so I remember being on my knees and thinking and saying and praying for the first time in my life, if you are there and you are real, and you show me the answers on how to help myself and help my kids in this awful situation. No matter what you ask me to do, I will do it. Even if I don't feel like it's right or I don't have the courage, I will do it. Mm-hmm. And then I mean, there wasn't like lightning that came and this, it didn't boom with the bookstore. Some person didn't come on the loudspeaker and tell me exactly what to do. I kind of just walked out of the bookstore, closed up all the books, went back into my minivan, and really went on with my day, went on with the evening. But over time, the answers started coming. And I started to see that there were lots of choices that I had, that I wasn't stuck.
Yeah.
That I didn't have to settle for being helpless and hopeless. And so after that, I promised in that bookstore, I promised God that I would spend every day for the rest of my life helping other women in this situation. And that's what I'm doing.
In the beginning of your story, you were saying, you wanted to like kind of do all the fixing, and you wanted to remind him and help him. And why do you think it is that why do you think that we think we can fix somebody with an addict? Because I feel like that's our first thing that we attempt to try, is to fix the situation or fix them, or, we're trying to heal them as a person. And yeah, like, why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that we try to fix people?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think we need to start off with asking who is the type of woman that will allow that relationship, like a broken relationship or somebody that needs to be fixed in their life. Because there are healthy women that are listening to this right now that are going, are you kidding? I would have never gotten into a relationship with this guy.
Yeah.
So I was doing a personal coaching call with somebody, and they said, why do I stay with him? Why do I put up with all this behavior? And it's like this. Let's say that you just met somebody and they ask you out on a date. And he says, okay, I'm going to be at your house at 7:00 to pick you up. So you wait, and 7:00 comes and he's not there. And then maybe an hour comes by and he finally shows up at your door. And you open the door and he says, hey, and there's no apology. And you kind of get like a sense that he's drunk. You might smell his breath. He might have glossy eyes. There's something about him that just doesn't feel right. Okay. Well, there are certain women that will open the door and say, you know what? You look like you've had a hard night. Why don't you come in? I'll make you some coffee and we can talk about it. Then there are other women that would look at the man and say, you're an hour late. Clearly you're drunk or something's off. You need to go find another woman and shut the door. And so I think the type of women that we are, that allow the man to come into our life, that come into our home, that come into our hearts, we are the type of women that are extremely empathetic, that are super compassionate, that really want to change the world in a very gentle, loving way. Now, some people think that call that codependency. I happen to really dislike that word, because I feel like the very traits that someone could label us as codependent are actually the very gifts that God has given us. They're just a liability sometimes. Yeah. And so we have a really hard time with our boundaries and setting boundaries, and we kind of allow too much to go on for too long. Yeah. And so what we need to do is, rather than beat ourselves up and feel ashamed and worry about why we are allowing this behavior in our life, we need to extend the compassion and the empathy that we are giving our loved ones to ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves for being this beautifully wonderful, loving human being, and just offer ourselves that same love first. And if we save that for ourselves first, I think that our decisions and our boundaries with the people that are harming us or hurting us will change. one of my pet peeves is when people say stuff like what I just said. They don't give practical tools on how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So let me break that down. Like if you're like that type of woman that you're like, okay, what does that mean, Michelle? Like, how do I apply that to my life? Right? Okay, so for example, when you love somebody, and this can be anybody, this doesn't just have to be somebody who's addicted to drugs and alcohol. This could be you can apply this to your kids. You can apply this to your current husband who's a sober person. You can apply this to your work.
Yeah.
But when you sit there and you are placing more energy and more emphasis on the things and people around you, when you are serving others before you are serving yourself first, you know you have a balance issue. So what I like to do is I like to create a list, and I've done this forever, of 10 things that bring me joy that I can do. I love bubble baths, but bubble baths where I'm alone, where I lock the door and I buy, really super delicious smelling bubble bath. And I get like a really nice, one of my favorite books to read. And I'll turn the lights down. And every night I give myself the gift of this bubble bath. Now, sometimes it's only 10 minutes and sometimes it's an hour. It depends. But I know that that is a way for me to recharge, for me to find a peaceful moment, for me to give a gift to myself for all my hard work. Another example is I really love this biscotti cookie. They hand them out on American Airlines, which is where I've discovered them. I found them at my local grocery store. So I go by, I have literally like way too many on my shelf right now in my pantry, but I treat myself to 3 or 4 every night with a cup of tea. And so after I get out of my bath, I get in my cozy pajamas and I get into bed and I eat my 3 or 4 cookies with my warm cup of tea. And that is something that I do now nothing, and let me repeat, and this is where I come back to the boundaries part, nothing gets in the way of me doing that. So my kids, like I make sure my kids are tucked in, they're into bed. I have 6 kids total, but I have 2 little ones. And the 10-year-old and the 6-year-old cannot do bedtime. So they will literally, the other night, I opened the door that I had locked, and there were 2 little people outside my door with their blankets and pillows. But you know what? But the thing is that it was that door was that boundary for me.
Yeah.
And it's a really healthy thing to model for your kids too. So self-care is so necessary. And if we are taking care of ourselves and putting work aside and our children aside and our husbands aside and really focusing in on making those moments and doing one thing out of that list of 10 per day, that kind of exercise and action will be life-changing. And it's very, very simple, but it's very difficult to do on a consistent basis. And the consistency is the key.
Yeah.
And so going back to your original question, that is the reason why some of us feel like we want to change them so bad, because we are placing all the emphasis on them and not on ourselves and changing our behavior.
Yeah.
It's way too easy and convenient for us to be married to somebody who has these very obvious problems, to put all of our focus and energy into that. It's a convenient way to just stunt our personal growth. And we need to take back that power. We need to transfer the power back to us and say, you know what? Ultimately, the only person who's going to give me permission to feel better is myself. And if I'm relying on him or my job or my kids or anyone else, if I'm placing the responsibility of my happiness on anyone else or anything else, the only person who's at fault for that is me.
Yeah.
So that's how you kind of shift the perspective of placing all the emphasis on helping others and putting it back on helping ourselves.
Yeah, and you mentioned that there's different women, and I think that yes, like some of us would open the door and some of us would be like, heck no, get off my porch. But as I was reading your bio on your website, which was beautiful and very brave, and I just love how you wrote about your story. But I realized that a lot of the things that you were experiencing within yourself, like insecurity and trying to look put together, even when you were hurting, and focusing on, like you just talked about, being empathetic towards others but not towards yourself. I feel like so many of us, no matter if we would get into this kind of relationship or not, like that's how we are, or we can identify with a lot of those same things. But just because you're with a partner who is an addict, I feel like all those insecurities come to a head like a lot faster and a lot more amplified. And so I just wanted to say, like, I think that no matter who you are, I feel like you can relate to a woman who has come from an abusive relationship, because we all kind of sort of deal with these insecurities, but for some it's more amplified than others.
I agree. I mean, I think, look, I came into this relationship broken.
Yeah.
There was a reason why I attracted this person in my life. And then what addiction does though is it's incredibly conniving, and it can be incredibly destructive, because it basically takes all of your insecurities and enforces them.
Yeah.
So it basically says, like, I went into the relationship feeling very unlovable and just not good enough.
Yeah.
Like that was I was never good enough. And I still struggle with that. I'm getting pretty close to, being okay with who I am. But when you're married to somebody who's an alcoholic or an addict, and let's say they constantly reject you, you ask them, please don't drink. They look at you in the eye and they say, I promise I won't do it anymore. And then 2 days later, a week later, a month later, you find beer bottles hidden. Mm-hmm. You take that as a personal rejection. The message you tell yourself is, I'm not good enough for him to get sober. Mm. You tell yourself, he loves alcohol more than he loves me.
Yeah.
You sit there, and some addicts are incredibly verbally abusive. So they will enforce your negative beliefs. They'll tell you what it is that you're thinking about yourself, and hold that against you.
Yeah.
So let's say, he loves to party. This happened to me. My ex-husband loved to go to parties. Well, I'm an introvert. I don't, I love just one-on-one or, small intimate gatherings. Well, he would use that against me and say, you're just no fun. You don't know how to have a good time. And so there's a part of you that goes, oh my gosh, am I really a stick in the mud? Like, am I really no fun? I am no fun. And your mind starts to believe that about yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important to understand that positive self-talk is one of the most powerful tools that you can do for yourself. Your voice, your loving voice, your voice from God, your voice from the Holy Spirit, your voice from, internally, needs to be louder than the voice of addiction. Yeah. And the only way that you can get there is by every time that you hear that, is first by identifying the addiction voice. By every time you have a negative thought, taking inventory and going, okay, is that coming from God? Because if it is, then or if most negative thoughts are not.
Right.
So you need to say, okay, that's not how God feels about me. That's addiction. So I'm going to choose to do something about that. Then the second step would be, okay, what is the exact opposite of that statement? So if for me, it was, he doesn't love you enough. You're not good enough for him to love you. Then I would sit there and I would say to myself, Michelle, you are deeply lovable. You are a thoughtful, committed, loyal wife who most sober men would find as a beautiful gift in a marriage. That type of thing. And at first you don't believe it. At first you're like, Do I really think that about myself? But the more you practice that, the more the addiction voice gets smaller and smaller. And here's the funny thing. Even after you leave your alcoholic or addict, even if you do choose to leave, that voice is still there. That was one of the biggest, most shocking things to me. I thought if I left, I was leaving it all behind. But it took me years to unprogram my mind to not hear that voice anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think that that's really hard to overcome, like, especially if you've been in a relationship so long and you've been hearing those lies and those awful things that he might say about you, and, like, to all of a sudden be able to believe your own self. And I don't know, I feel like that would be such a hard thing to kind of start to do, to look at yourself in a different way, or to believe what you're trying to believe versus, what he's been making you to believe this whole time.
Yeah, but that's why I think that addiction is such a gift. And I do consider it a real gift, is because I know that I had that work to do before I met him. And addiction kind of forced me into doing my own self-work. Like it, I could either sit there and be a martyr and believe the lies that addiction was feeding me, or I could fight back.
Yeah.
And I could fight for myself and fight for my kids and say, I'm not going down with him. You might be able to take him down, but you're not going to do that to me. And you're not going to do that to my kids. And so every time that you try, I'm going to come back rising higher and stronger. And it took me a while to get there. It's not something that happened overnight, but the ultimate decision was a monumental decision for me, where I was like, no more. This is it. I'm done with this. Not necessarily with the marriage, but with the abuse and the lies. And so that's why I think that if you are in a relationship, if any of your listeners are in a relationship where you love somebody suffering from addiction, this is a wonderful opportunity, because whether he's in your life or not, you need to do this work.
Yeah.
You need to. And because it will follow you into the next relationship.
What would you tell your children when he would like leave for, all night or not come back in the morning? How do you parent through something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I love and firmly believe in the theory of open communication. Now when I left, my kids were 1.5, 3, and 6.
Oh my gosh, so little.
And yeah, they were little. Now the 1.5-year-old was clueless. He didn't have any idea what was going on. But the 3-year-old and 6-year-old absolutely did. Kids are so much more aware than parents think they are. They think they're hiding this disease from their neighbors or their parents, and maybe you are. But I promise you, if it's going on in your house, they are aware. They might not understand it's drugs, alcohol, pornography, but they understand that something is going on. And so I always encourage mothers to have an open communication with their children about their father's struggle. Now, there's rules around that, and I talk about this a lot in the Love Over Mistakes program, but just to give you like a high level. So your kids reserve the right to form their own opinion about their father, not inherit your own. Like, you need to give your kids space to make up their mind about how they feel about their dad. And that's a warning to women who you should not, could not, and really, really should make a serious effort not to talk poorly about him. What you can do is stick to the facts. So, for example, you can say something like, Daddy is very sick right now. He has a disease that only Daddy can choose to make better. There's nothing that you can do to help him. And anytime that you want to talk to me about it, I'm here for you. And you know who else is here for you? Your Heavenly Father. You can talk to him about that, about what's going on and how you're feeling at any time. And then it's going into detail about what's happening. So you can say, Daddy, struggles with drinking too much. This is a disease. And when daddy chooses to get help, he'll feel and get much better. But until he does that, he's going to continue to drink too much. And so you're giving kids permission to understand what's going on around them, why daddy's passed out, why daddy is missing soccer games, why he's not coming home. But you're not throwing him under the bus. You're just sticking to the facts. And I remember when I had my kids in therapy, I took them to like 3 sessions. And the therapist told me something that was so valuable. She said, Michelle, because I was very worried about leaving and breaking up the family, I felt really guilty about that. But I also felt very conflicted because I didn't want them under the same roof as drugs and alcohol. And the idea of leaving scared me so much. But I took them to this therapist and she said, Michelle, kids just need one good, consistent, loving parent. 2 is a bonus. But if they just have one, if one of you is there for them, they have an amazing success rate. They have great chances of becoming loving, thoughtful leaders in their community. And that was kind of the validation that I knew that I needed to remain calm and to remain present and with them, but also be okay with the chaos that was going on around addiction with my husband.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Having those conversations with your kids, like letting them see that it's not them, that it's not their fault, and also acknowledging kind of the elephant in the room, because kids are very aware and they see things that, and like, even though they can't fully understand it, they just like how they watch us, and that's how they learn, like by what we do, they're seeing everything around them. And I think that gives them like this freedom, that it's something that he has to fix, and it's not something that's their fault or that they have to fix or that they did wrong. And yeah, I think that could be really liberating for little kids.
And also, I think it's really important to touch on this, is that if you do a great job of or even a good job, not even a great job, but a good job of regularly discussing what is going on under your roof, when they become teenagers, because I have 4 teenagers right now, you are absolutely setting the stage for healthy decisions when they get older. Because there are a lot of statistics that talk about how this disease is genetic. And so it is something that you need to be aware of when your kids are going to be offered drugs and alcohol. Yeah. So by communicating to them and saying there is a very good chance that you have a genetic predisposition to addiction. And statistically speaking, the longer that you wait for your first sip of alcohol, your first cigarette, your first whatever, that's hopefully it will never be drugs, but in some, states this is now legal, so it's a reality. The longer that you wait, the lower your chances of becoming addicted are. Right. And that conversation is really important. And I've had this conversation with my kids multiple times. In fact, my 16-year-old son just completed a paper on why he thought marijuana should be illegal in all instances. And he was the only child in his class, in his 10th grade class, including the teacher, that believed this to be true. And he was brave enough and strong enough of a person to get up in front of the class and do a presentation on how drugs and alcohol has directly affected his life and the negative income that it has had. Now, that to me is one of the many blessings that this disease has brought my children. My daughter, who just started high school, is a freshman representative for a committee that she wanted to join called SAD. It used to be MAD, which is drug driving. Now they've updated it, and now it's Students Against Destructive Decisions. And so it encompasses not just drinking, but also drugs. And she's now the freshman representative. And she feels so strongly and passionately about this that she's going to go around to other schools and educate middle schoolers on this issue. Yeah. So this is, again, like, if we have the courage and the communication skills to discuss this with our kids when they're younger, they can take what's happened to them and change the lives of future generations of children who are also affected by this disease.
Not only like parents relationships, if somebody has an issue with addiction, but also it makes me think of when parents even just get divorced, like normal parents, like you don't want to kind of put one or the other under the bus, because you're angry at your spouse. Like it just puts your kids in this like weird position, but you don't need to lie to them. Like you need to have that open communication, but yet like they don't need to take on your opinions because they're yours, they're not theirs.
Absolutely. And there's proper stages for it, right? I mean, for example, I didn't tell my 3-year-old everything that I told my 6-year-old. And there are still things about my marriage that I've kept from my kids that their father has done that just frankly is none of their business.
Right.
Whether it's infidelity issues or whatever. I'm not sitting there giving everyone permission to just you have to have a filter. You have to know what they need to know and what they don't, and there is a difference.
Yeah.
But not pretending it's not an issue, shoving it under the rug, making excuses for his poor behavior, sends mixed messages to your children, and you actually think you're doing them a favor, but in reality, it's actually harming them.
Yeah.
And it's a missed opportunity.
How did you decide that you wanted to leave, and how did you overcome those obstacles of leaving and then knowing that like it just doesn't end once you walk out the door, that you still have a rough road like ahead, and what made you want to still pursue that, knowing those things?
Yeah. So leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life by far. Mm-hmm. And I've done some pretty hard things, but trying to leave somebody who does not want to be left. Addiction is all about control, right? And so when addiction feels threatened or out of control, it tends to get worse. And it will go to drastic measures to try and regain control. So for me, wanted to arrive at a moment where I knew where I could leave or I could stay and be at peace with that decision for years. And then one day, we were in our old home and all the restrooms were broken, but there was one in particular that was working, and my daughter needed to go to the bathroom. And she was 3 at the time. And she was banging on the door, and her dad was in there. It was like a little toilet area. And she said, Daddy, I need to go to the bathroom. And she's banging on the door, and he's not coming out. And so I walked over to her, and I knocked on the door, and I said, are you okay in there? And he answers back. He says, I'm fine. I'll be out in a second. So I wait with her, and I say, it's okay. Just one more second. And I'm playing with her to keep, her mind off of having to go to the bathroom. And all of a sudden the door opens, and a puff of smoke just falls out of the room. And he walks by us, and he looks at me, and it's just like slow motion. Yeah. He has like this glazed smile, and his eyes are super glossy. And I realize he's high. That's pot. And my daughter runs into the toilet area and sits down on the toilet and starts going to the bathroom. And I remember the exact spot that I was looking at on the wallpaper. And it hit me. I have to go. I absolutely have to go. My daughter is breathing in this smoke. It's the end. And I think that if I did not have kids, I might still be there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I know at that moment that I was my kids' biggest advocate, that I was there to protect them. And they were not being protected anymore. And it was time. And I was willing and prepared to do everything I possibly could. I had no money. Because addiction is expensive. Yeah. And I had no job because I was a stay-at-home mom, so I hadn't worked in 6 years. I didn't have a college degree or this amazing resume. So I called the shelter, a local shelter on a phone book, which tells you how old I am that I was looking at. And said, how many nights can you take a mom and her kids? And I had kept this disease a secret from my family because I didn't want anyone to, I wanted to protect him. I wanted everyone that I loved to love my husband. I didn't want them to think poorly of him. And so my family didn't have a clue. They didn't live locally either, which helped. And so I called, it was Christmas time, and my dad was coming down to visit. And so he got off the plane and he saw me and he could tell something was wrong. And we went out to dinner and I told him everything. And I said, I need to go. I need to leave. And he looked at me, and we didn't have a very good relationship up until this point too. And he said, I will do everything I can to help. And that was shocking to me because that's one of the things I also teach in the program is ask for help, because a lot of times we think we can do it on our own, and you'd be amazed at how many people are willing to show up and take care of your kid or for an hour or, bring you a meal or, do something helpful that you need. And so when my dad said, I will be there for you, he really meant it. And we made a list, I still have it today, of our top 10 priorities. We're big list builders. I should list a lot. But we made a list. And the number one thing that he put on there was safety first. The safety of your kids, the safety of you comes above everything else. And I really wondered why he had put that on there at first. But he's a wise man and graduated from Harvard. And he said, I needed that list. That number one priority came in handy because I ended up having to hide at hotels under a fake name with my kids.
Oh my gosh.
I had to take out a restraining order. I had to do a lot of things that I never, ever dreamt that I would do. I mean, I was had a normal childhood. I was a smart person. I couldn't believe that my life had come to this, but that's what addiction does. I had to nail down the windows of my home, and my stepdad said he bought me a firearm. I never saw it. I never wanted to see it. But those are the things that I had to do. But here's the truth. If you were to ask me today, would I take back anything? Any of those moments, I would say absolutely not. I really wouldn't, because every one of those challenging situations allowed me to rise and grow into the woman that I needed to become. That was the personal growth that I had, I know God needed me to do and needed me to go through. And was it painful? Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had to pull over in the car on the side of the road and just kind of let myself cry and fall apart for a moment, and then pick myself back up and go through carpool line and be a positive mom and go back to the hotel. But I will say I would do it all over again. Yeah. And what sounds even crazier is that during that entire time, I was really, really heavily practicing gratitude. And I was so grateful throughout that time. I remember coming back from something, I don't remember what it was, but I was hiding out and I had no idea where he was. And I was desperately trying to get back into my house and going through a lot of legal issues to do that. And I remember driving my car alone and going, okay, Michelle, you hear a lot about people talking about gratitude. That is the opposite of fear, right? Mm-hmm. Because we can't be fearful and grateful at the same time. So how do I get to that point? Because I am scared to death. And I remember thinking, sitting at the light, and it was green. And I was like, okay, I'm grateful for this green light. I'm grateful for the man who invented the seatbelt, so in case I get into a car accident, chances are I'm safe. I'm grateful for the sweatshirt, which feels really warm and cozy on me right now. I'm grateful that I actually have a place to drive to, that I'm not homeless. I have the cash to pay for this hotel. I'm grateful for the delicious bagel that they serve in the morning and the complimentary breakfast. I'm grateful for a complimentary breakfast. And, and just going on and on and on. And by the time that I parked the car, my heart was completely transformed. I went from a place of total fear to a place of such gratitude and love that I realized that is the key. And so I did it every day. And it changed everything for me. It was probably one of the biggest tools that I learned and put into practice.
Yeah. Do you think that leaving part, I just feel like it's so hard. Like I'm just picturing you toting around these kids and, obviously you're at this point probably more worried about their safety than you are your own. But like, like trying to keep them safe and put them in hotel rooms and, keep them safe in their beds while you're nailing down your windows. Like, is that the hardest part of, being in this kind of relationship? Like the leaving and because I feel like at this point it would be so easy for you to just say like, okay, like I'll take you back if you stop doing this to my family. Like, you know what I mean? Like pursuing you and just in a scary way that you is like, so I don't know. I feel like it'd be really hard.
Well, it definitely was hard, but I will tell you it was much harder living in the purgatory of I don't know what to do. When I finally reached that decision at that place where I was looking at the wallpaper, I promise you that place was such a place of strength and conviction that there was absolutely nothing he could have done to get me back. And they will try to do that. I mean, when they see that you're serious about leaving, they will beg rehab. They will buy you gifts. They will promise to go to AA, and they might for a short period of time until they realize that you're back staying there. But no, I think I don't, yes, those were challenging moments. But when you are absolutely certain that leaving is the right thing to do and you have that conviction, you overcome every obstacle. Here's the truth about courage is that it doesn't arrive when you're folding laundry. It's not like you don't feel courageous when you're washing dishes. That's not when you realize that you're a courageous woman. The courage is hiding in the seeps of your bones, in the depth of your soul. And it's waiting to come up and show up and prove itself when you need it. And so you have to be willing to put yourself in those situations where you are scared to death, but you need your courage. And then all of a sudden, when you're there, it arrives. Yeah. And the more that you practice that, the more that courage lives right below your surface. It becomes easier and easier to access, and you actually learn that you can draw on it at any time. You start to trust that it's there.
That reminds me of like those stories you hear about moms when, their kids are in danger and they do like these outrageous things to save their kids. Yeah. Like lift up cars and, that's what it reminds me of. But it's so true. Like if you can do it then, like I think you can, if you just figure out, how to channel it, like you were saying, and use it in other instances, then yeah, like we are total like rock stars.
Rock stars, total rock. And I think even if you, particularly for your children, but also for you. And when you have that courage, they are watching.
Yeah.
Like my daughter right now, she is one of the feistiest girls I know. If there is a kid that is being bullied, she will be the first one to get in between that bully and that victim and say, no way.
Yeah.
And I know that was because she saw me get in between addiction and her and say, no way, not her. You're not messing with her. You can mess with me all you want to, but you are not touching my babies.
Yeah. Mama bear.
Yeah.
If a mom is listening and she is like, if she is relating to this and all the things that you're saying, and she is maybe with somebody or in a relationship with somebody right now who has an addiction of whatever sort, what would you want her to walk away with listening to this episode?
No, I would say that there's hope, that you don't have to stay stuck. One of the things that I love about our community is that we don't focus on leaving versus staying. Like, that's probably the last step of the steps that we teach. It has, if you're sitting there and what I just told you about leaving is bringing complete fear to you, that's okay. That's okay that you're afraid. That's okay that I'm pulling up a lot of buttons and triggers for you. Set that aside. Don't worry about leaving versus staying yet. You will get there in time. Where you need to start with is the very beginning, which is working on you. And if you do your own work, if you start practicing boundaries and, you start identifying what a boundary is for you, if you start practicing healthy tools next time he drinks, if you start communicating with your kids, if you start getting the help that you need on a regular basis, the leaving versus staying will come. I always say, like, you could forgive yourself for choosing to stay today because you reserve the right to change your mind tomorrow. So many women get stuck on this whole leaving versus staying thing. And that's not where we need to put our efforts. That will just come naturally. Where you need to place all of your work is getting yourself help. Don't worry. Stop Googling about, AA groups or where to put him or rehabs or anything. Stop researching ways to get him better and start researching ways to work on yourself. Yeah. That's the biggest message. That's the biggest takeaway. And that actually, it's so funny because I was interviewing this woman the other day who purchased the Love Over Addiction program. And she was like, you know what, Michelle? I was so mad at you at the beginning when I purchased your program. And I'm like, why? And she's like, because I thought this program was going to teach me how to help him get sober. And then, and I was like, yeah, I don't know where you read that, but I know. And she's like, well, I just assumed. But then I kept doing it, and I realized this program is all about me. And now I'm completely transformed. Whether he gets sober or not, I can access the happiness and courage and strength that I have always known I needed to, whether he's passed out on the couch or not.
Yeah. Being separate from, like, their issues is a huge deal, because I feel like we just tend to bear the weight of so many things that aren't ours to carry.
Right? I think women in general just do that. I was talking to someone today, and the women alcoholics are severely on the rise. So is actually marijuana use with women. Their new demographic for marijuana distributors are women over the age of 40. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I said, my husband told me that, and I was like, you know what? That does not surprise me because of all the pressure that we put on ourselves to do it all, to be everything to everyone. It's just too much, and that's why when I see those shirts that say like namaste and rose, there's a part of me that's like giggles because I love yoga and I drink wine. And then there's a part of me that's like, you know what? I think this is becoming an unhealthy coping mechanism. Yeah. And what we really need to be doing is removing things off of our plate and practicing self-care and detaching from all of the people that need us all of the time.
Yeah, I think that I can't remember what episode, but I remember bringing that up, like how we kind of joke about how, how stressful it is, and that we're like, oh, we're going to, I'll just drink a bottle of wine tonight. But then it's like, it's sort of funny, but at the same time, like the pressures is really real, like you said, and a glass each night turns into more, and then it becomes into an issue, and so I think, it's just hard to, and that's something I really want people to know, and that's something that I'm trying to do, is to not strive for perfectionism at all. Like, to know that I'm never going to nail it. And
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, amen. Like seriously, I remember taking my child to a Bible study and he was literally had a poopy diaper and one shoe on and I could not find the other. And I'm like, you know what? I just handed them over to the woman and I'm like, I'm sorry. And she's my good friend now and she was joking with me and saying, Michelle, I remember you didn't even have a diaper bag with you. And I was like, I know. It's just about survival.
Yeah.
Like, and here's the deal. That kid right now that came with the poopy diaper and one shoe and I never did find the other one. Like that kid is 10 years old and kicking butt at school and is like the nicest, sweetest little boy who, when I come home, he's like one of the very few kids that from the hairdressers, he'll be like, oh, your hair looks beautiful, Mom.
Aww.
Like that's what you want.
Yeah.
You know, that's the focus. It's does he have is he a nice person? And if you're raising nice kids, who cares about all the other stuff? Who cares about the grades? Who cares about being best in sports? Who cares about where they go to college? Like, let's just focus on manners and kindness and let everything else drop. And I had to get there, and we could probably do a whole other episode on this, but like with 6 kids, you seriously cannot do it all. Yeah. Like literally. And so you really learn like what to pay attention to and what's important and what to call out and what to just go, you know what? He didn't hand in his homework. It was an F. Oh, well, you know, like he's actually like a very decent human being that just shared a toy with somebody who asked for it. I'm good. We're all good. It's good.
Yeah. Hopefully we can just be better at being a little bit more easy on ourselves. I'm trying. I'm not perfect. I know that I say that, and then my husband's like, did you listen to your own episode? And he's going to laugh because he listens to my episode. So then he comes home and he's like, do you remember like that you just said that? Like, you know, and I'm like, So
that's hilarious. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So where can we go to follow you? Because your blog is really great. You write about a lot of these awesome topics that, you know, I think that if you're struggling post relationship that, you know, with somebody who was an addict or, you know, or in it, you have really great topics and you have really awesome courses and there's the podcast and a book, right? I think it's a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have like all these things. Okay. So share where everybody can find all the things.
So you can find it at 2 different sites that will lead you to the same place, which is MichelleLisaAnderson.com, which is kind of hard for people to remember. And so you can also find me at loveoveraddiction.com.
Okay.
And all of the information is there. The name of the podcast is Wife of an Alcoholic, but we cover way more topics than just alcoholism. But you can find all the information is right there on the website.
Okay. And all the links to your Facebook I see are on here too. So if we want to.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I try to post regularly, which was a huge stretch for me because I'm an introvert and I'm like, who really cares about this stuff? But does anyone care? But they do. So it's good. It's good. I push myself.
The more you bring to light the struggles, then the less hold it has on us. And so no matter what it is. But
yeah.
So if you could choose one of the most influential books that you've read, what would it be?
Okay, so this is going to sound a little trite, but stick with me on this.
Okay.
I would have to say, I'm a big reader, but I would have to say the most influential book was the book of Matthew in the Bible because it was the first book that I read. I remember reading, I studied it for a year, and I remember reading the first half and seeing all of Jesus's like words in red, and there was all these kind of, you know, do not murder, do not hate, and I kept thinking for the first half of the year, I was like, oh my gosh, I am a murderer. Because I am like hateful in my heart. And I just kept thinking I'm not good enough. Like, again, we go back to that not good enough thing. Like, I'm never going to get it perfect. Jesus expects me to be this way and I can never live up to his expectations. But I kept trying harder and harder. And then I got to the end of the book towards the end of the study, and I realized what he did for me and how much he loved me. And that is when I realized that loving Jesus is only 50% of the equation, but the other 50% is accepting the love that he has for you. So that was like the full circle for me, was how much effort am I putting into trying to please somebody who is already so wonderfully pleased by me. And that gave me permission to rejoice and to find joy in the small moments and to kind of surrender this, hustle for trying to be better and do better, this need for perfection, this need for achievement. It kind of allowed me to relax and to feel accepted and loved in a way that I had never experienced through any human before.
Yeah.
So that for me was the most powerful book. But my new favorite is, and I'm sure most of your readers have heard of this or have read it, is Present Over Perfection.
Oh,
have you heard of
yes.
that? Oh my gosh.
Okay, I haven't read it yet, but I keep seeing it, and I had no idea what it was about, but just off of the title, I was like, yes.
Right? Totally. So that's my books.
Yeah. If you could empower women in one way, what would it be?
I would say, and I kind of touched on this before, I think the ability to share your story and specifically share your shame. Select one or two people in your life today, whether you know them really well or not, that you feel comfortable talking with and sharing your story with about loving somebody with addiction issues. And make it a point to have an intimate conversation with them. And I promise you will find amazing healing. Just be very, very careful who you select. Make sure when you select somebody that they're going to just listen, and maybe you even prompt them with that and say, I'm not really looking for advice. I'm just looking for a safe place to share. Will you do me a wonderful favor of just hearing me for the next 10 minutes? I'm going to tell you things that I've never told anyone else that I feel really embarrassed about sharing. And I just need you to give me the gift of listening.
If you could tell your younger self one thing, assuming that she would listen, what would it be?
I would tell myself, Michelle, this is going to be a very rocky road because you learn the hard way, and be okay with that. Like, I am the type of person where I need the lesson to be repeated like multiple times, like an obnoxiously large amount of times until I get it, until I'm like, oh, okay, like maybe that's not the best thing for me, or maybe I should change that. So I think I beat myself up every time like something happens. That's my like MO, is like, I'm like, oh, why can't I just learn the first time? And now I understand, and I'm so much more full of grace with myself and being like, okay, didn't get it that time, maybe next, So just being able to tell myself, Michelle, like, your life is going to be difficult, and you need to learn things, multiple times, but be kind to yourself along the way. Be loving and gentle with yourself. Forgive yourself as soon as you possibly can. And because you are a determined woman and you will pick yourself up and keep going on, but just remember to check yourself before moving on to make sure that you have really forgiven yourself for not learning that lesson.
I need to write that down so I could tell myself that all the time. I'm like, she's telling me these things. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on. I know that you guys, we have been trying so hard to connect and make this happen. And then your house was affected by all the Florida rain and craziness. And so hopefully that's all handled now and you guys can calm down and enjoy life.
Yes, there's nothing like a natural disaster of a hurricane to set you to delay a whole bunch of things. But thank you for being patient with me. I'm really grateful. And I loved being on. Thank you for making space for this important topic.
All right, you guys know the drill. If you want to find the links to everything that was mentioned in this episode, head on over to todayseden.com, click on the podcast tab, and then click on Michelle's episode. And the quote I want to leave with you today is, And if I could tell you one thing, it would be, you are never as broken as you think you are. Sure, you have a couple scars and a couple bad memories, but then again, all great heroes do.